career in tech. Cool. I've had a really great career in tech, but I didn't always start out that way. I have a traditional graphic design background. I went to school here on the East Coast. My bachelor's is in graphic design. And so I really started to carve out a niche for myself. And I'm going to show you specific examples and give you some just tips and tricks on like how to wedge yourself in when maybe you don't have a ton of specific UX experience. You can do that. I've done it, and I've seen other people do it really successfully. But first, I want kind of like a philosophical question of like, what kind of designer do you want to be? This is a bit of a soul searching. You probably, or maybe you do, but you might not know just yet, and that is fine. It will change over time. But I want to get into a little bit about the specifics around the types of design that we see. The UX industry is changing and evolving and growing. Content design is it used to just be like a UX writer. Now it's a full discipline with even specialties and niches within there. I just did a quick search on LinkedIn for job postings. And I imagine if you're looking for a career as a designer, you're doing the same, or you will be, or you have done that recently. It can be really overwhelming, right? Like, what's the difference between all of these roles? Like, what's a product designer? What's a UI versus interaction designer? Companies tend to use buzzwords. You see, again, how things kind of evolve and change over time. So I want to get really specific about, at least as a hiring manager or as a designer applying to a role, what you can expect from some of the main pillars when we use words like UI designer or graphic designer or UX designer. What does that mean? And that comes with a set of expectations with the role. And I think that might help you narrow down, of those like thousands of job posts with the word designer in them, that's super overwhelming. How can we make it so you're feeling confident in applying to the ones that you feel fit for? Again, I know this is super overwhelming. Let's break it down and kind of see and talk about the different types of design that we see sometimes in these job postings. So graphic designer, that one's pretty straightforward, right? Like, this is typically can be either in-house or an agency. Again, like, one of the exciting things about working at an agency is like you get to kind of bounce around. You go really broad. I was a graphic designer at a marketing agency for a really long time. One day I was learning about like, T-Mobile and all of their stuff. And then the next day I was working on a nonprofit campaign. So you get to kind of sample a lot of different things. Your common deliverable as a graphic designer tends to be campaigns, visual, generally 2D, although that doesn't necessarily mean you wouldn't do things like TV spots or billboards, brand identity, very, very visual. A UI designer is really a digital component to that as well. If I'm looking for a UI designer, I want you to have a really strong visual design background, pixel perfection. Again, making sure that things are beautiful. That's often with how do the buttons look, the iconography, space and motion, things like that. I'll show you some examples as well. And then a UX designer. And again, you may hear it also as like interaction designer. This is like how things work, end-to-end flows or journeys. You're prototyping, you're making storyboards. As Larry mentioned, you're in Figma oftentimes. But again, like really putting the user at the heart. What problem are we trying to solve? Those are generally the three kind of big buckets I see when I search designer on LinkedIn. Again, I often see this split as well, which is interaction design. That's like how things work. On my team, I've got folks that kind of sit in both buckets. An interaction designer can often work in lower fidelity. They're doing information architecture. They're building prototypes. They really want to understand from beginning to end. Whereas a visual designer, you have a really strong sense of hierarchy, certainly beauty and elegance, and kind of a bit of, I call it like sparkle. I'm gonna put a bit of sparkle on there. Design systems, which we'll talk a little bit about design system teams as well. You're working in the highest fidelity, again, looking for someone with pixel perfection. So when you're crafting a portfolio, it can be really helpful to kind of begin to slide your way into one of these lanes so that as a hiring manager, I have a really good understanding of what type of role you would fit on my team. Now, again, you might not know that yet, and that's fine. This will change over time. You might start pretty general and have a couple samples of each. But as you work more and more and you kind of see which area you like best, you'll start to really craft a portfolio that speaks to your strengths and what you want to do. And I'll show you some examples of that. Also, getting back to the philosophical part, like what kind of designer do you want to be? There's so many different ways you can use design to not to be dramatic, but like change the world. Like, do you want to design for good? So like use your skills for nonprofits or building community for social good. That's really, really an awesome like power of design. I have a lot of initiatives around diversity and inclusion and making sure that we're designing things for everyone that are accessible and inclusive for all. You want to influence an industry. We see this a lot with political things or education, nonprofits. Again, you can use design as sort of a superpower to help influence the world. Not to be too dramatic, but it's true. TLDR, design truly makes everything possible. And so I want to get into a little bit about the specifics about how you kind of bust in, whether or not you have specific experience or not. And I'll share some sort of stories along the way. Most importantly, I think regardless of what type of designer that you want to be, like collaboration is at the heart of design. It takes a village to build anything, to ship anything. And so really being the type of person that people want to work with is really important. As a designer, you sort of hold the superpower of being able to create the collateral, to do the mock-ups, to do the prototype, but really you're collaborating with a whole team of people, engineers that build it, product managers that help you with strategy. And within design community itself, you're also really, a lot of collaboration happens within there, regardless of what kind of designer you are. So I want to talk a little bit about how different types of designers work together every day. And maybe that will spark some inspiration about what kind of designer you want to be. I work really closely with a design systems team. So if I were to think about a UI designer, you might hear a systems designer or a design systems thinker. This is someone, again, pixel perfection. You're looking at color, you're looking at typography, you're making sure that these are accessible, that they're beautiful. It tends to be a bit abstract from product. So I work on a product in Webex, I'm shipping features. I work with the design system teams. That's basically putting my playbook in front of me. What can I use visually? What type of color and iconography? And here we're doing a big Webex rebrand. How am I able to, how can we use color to indicate, this or that? Again, looking at things like typography, like making sure that the type scales across the entire product. As a designer on a feature, I'm not just going to randomly pick a font size, because then the next designer is going to pick a different font size, et cetera. So design systems help keep it's basically the playbook for the tools and the building blocks you can use in sort of the end-to-end UX or like interaction design. Love a design systems thinker. Again, pixel perfection, designing things like buttons, inputs, motion is part of this as well. Sound design and voice design can also be part of this. I don't personally work with a ton of that day to day, but definitely part of your design system. So if you're someone who's really passionate about graphic design, visual design, or UI design, design systems would be really something interesting to dig into as well. Then there's UX design. So that's user experience design. Sometimes you might hear it called user-centered design. That's when a designer, that's like me, applies that design system to the product. So I take all of the buttons and all of the colors and all of the typography that the design system team has created, and I apply it to the screens or to the flow or to the feature. So again, here's an example on mobile where I took that design system and applied it to the product. It's a two-way street, right? Like that's where that collaboration happens. If I run into an issue with the font or an issue with the icons kind of in product, I then go back and collaborate with the design systems team. And it's basically a two-way street. I contribute to them and they contribute back to me or to the product. Here's another example of just using sort of new components in a UI. So all of these, again, I don't pick these from scratch. Design, this all comes from a design system. And if you're someone who's super, super organized, if you're someone who, again, pixel perfection, good Figma hygiene, that's also very important. If you use components and symbols in Figma, again, that's something that a design systems thinker would absolutely be right. It would be right up your alley. I have not worked as a content designer, but I work with a ton of content designers. It's very cool to see that SBC now has their own track to help you get that certificate. It was previously just like, hey, can you fix this text string? But they're way more than that. They can help you with writing, information architecture, voice and tone, really, really important to the brand, and to making sure users understand what you're building. Don't take that for granted. Loop them in really, really early to your process. They want to go through that sort of discovery and understanding of the problem with you as the designer. Same with researchers. That's part of the collaborative process on the design side. You'll work with researchers every day. They're going to help validate what you built actually works for who you build it for. So absolutely loop them in early in your process as well. I'm going to go through, this is like lightning round. I'm going to go through a quick couple day in the life of a UX designer. This is false advertising. I'm not going to lie, every day is very different. I'm a manager of managers, so I'm in a lot of meetings. I have a lot of one-on-ones. I give a lot of feedback, but I want to share some of this is the highlight reel of like some of the best parts of the day to day. Some days I can just put my headphones on and kind of do my thing. Other days, again, I'm presenting to stakeholders, so there really is no one out of the box day, but some of the things that I highlight here are some of my favorite parts of the gig. So like all of you, I do start the day with too many cups of coffee. I ask everyone on my team to carve out 20% of their week to reading or personal development. So I'm always sort of seeing what's going on in the industry, reading a book about management, reading a book on design. Some folks on my team are taking motion design classes, brushing up on your Figma skills, again, taking notes, like kind of mapping out, time boxing, understanding the problem, sketching, those types of things. But that's one of my favorite parts of the gig. And I make sure on my team, everyone has space to do that. I love this picture because if you don't know, top left is an SBC graduate who ended up, I hired her for my team at Webex. Her name is Carrie. We met because she was a student of mine in, gosh, it might've been the capstone or portfolio. I think it was actually both. And she impressed me so much when I was hiring, I just had to hire her because she was amazing. So Carrie is here. She's still on my team to this day. A big part of the UX design, again, is that collaboration. And a lot of it, when we could get together in person, was doing like design sprints or workshops. We do this virtually now. It's great, but I'm not going to lie, it's not the same as in person. So I'm looking forward to when we can do that together. We do virtually whiteboard, we use Miro, there's all kinds of good remote solutions, but I do love getting together with the team and sketching out ideas, like brainstorming, riffing off each other's ideas. That's a big part of your job as a designer. You're going to talk about things, you're going to challenge each other, you're going to do what I call have healthy debate. And so just kind of understand, is this the right solution, and kind of challenge each other to just asking questions and unpacking that as a team. You're going to use a lot of Post-its if you don't know that already, but a big part of the job is also, I facilitate quite a few design sprints or design thinking workshops. I know there's been a couple great design thinking workshops, top on my friend Kristen Kite at SBC. I'm sure there are others as well. But really getting together with people to brainstorm, again, pick out themes of what do we want to solve for next? What problems are our users facing? Definitely as a UX designer, I probably go through 50 Post-its a day at least. Again, you're going to use a lot of Post-its. You're going to sketch ideas yourself. You're going to sketch ideas with your friends and your coworkers and your stakeholders. Some people prefer to do digital sketching. So in a tool like Balsamic or even low fidelity in Figma. You could do pen and paper. That's the best, I think. You're going to do it at a whiteboard. But again, like really being able to talk about your ideas, put them out there. You can see from the sketch that my teammates have done here, like it's not perfect, but I'm just trying to understand if this is viable. Should I pursue this? Before you ever get into Figma, you want to kind of talk it out with your people to understand, like, is this kind of the right direction? And what am I missing? What blind spots do I have? Really, really love being able to talk out sketch ideas together as a group. That's a key part of the sort of collaborative process. This is a false advertising. I wanted it to represent presenting to stakeholders. These are not stakeholders, but I am presenting. So I feel like it meets the bar, but you're going to present to stakeholders. That's a huge job, whether you're entry level or you're a senior designer or a manager. You're basically selling your ideas. And I think you'll see, we talk about this a lot actually in the SVC portfolio class. When you're presenting your work, what's the story? What's the why? What are we doing here? What are we solving? You can't just do a bunch of pretty screens and kind of like send them off. You really do have to present the idea, talk about sort of why it solves the problem. And you often do that in a small group, and you may do that in a large group as well. Big part of the job. And then you're just going to have a lot of fun. I mean, TLDR, like you have a lot of fun. You go through a lot. You, again, challenge each other. You brainstorm. Again, I love this picture. Actually, she's not in here. There's Carrie, but there's another SVC graduate on my team who actually was behind the camera, but that's why I love this picture as well. But again, you're going to have a lot of fun with these people who you will brainstorm with. It should be a culture of psychological safety and trust, and like free to be your creative self. Those are kind of the best gigs. So you're probably wondering, like, how do I get experience without any experience, right? That's probably the number one question I get. So I'm going to share a little story about in 2013, I was interviewing for my dream job at Microsoft. I was working as a graphic designer in an agency. I did not have any like formal UX experience, but I really, really wanted the job. So I was applying to be part of Microsoft's data visualization team. It would later become Power BI, if you know that tool. I really wanted this job. Really bad. I didn't know what I was in for, but I knew that I wanted it. And I knew that the portfolio I had didn't support the job that I wanted to get. So I sort of thought about how I can show this team that I've got what it takes, right? And so I created this self-driven project on Dribbble, which was cool at the time. I actually don't know if Dribbble is still a thing, but I ended up doing data visualization of the entire season of the New York Rangers hockey season. My husband is a huge fan. He was watching the games, and I was like, if I'm gonna watch these games, I'm going to visualize the final score of every game. So again, these took me like 15 or 20 minutes. There was a couple a week, super low, like lightweight. But again, I wanted to demonstrate I can do data visualization. I've never had a job where I had to do data visualization, but I can do it. I'm passionate about it. I look back at these now and I kind of cringe because I have since learned how to do data visualization on that team. But I think the moral of the story is that really you have the power to create a portfolio of the type of work that you want to do. You might not have the specific experience or the specific actual work, real life projects, but these self-initiated projects that can be fun, they can be lightweight, they can show a bit of your personality, can be really, really impactful to showing and demonstrating your skill set, and that you've got what it takes to join the team to do the type of work that you want to do. Another funny story. Okay, so in 5th grade, I won an invention contest. I took a label maker and I like duct taped it to a trash barrel. And I said that every time you threw something away, you would scan it. It was a label maker, but you would scan it so it knew what you threw away. And at the end of the week, it would print out your grocery list. And so like, I didn't know in 1994, but like that was an app. And so I found these old ribbons, like these things that my mom had kept in the basement. And so when I was applying to Google, again, I didn't have a ton of experience. I was coming from a data visualization team. I wanted to be on this like app team. Like, what can I do to be like, make it seem like I can do it? So I decided to take that idea from 1994 and make it into an app. Like that's what it would have been today. And so I called it the Shopmate. Actually, that's what I called it in 94, but now I like rebranded it. And I came up with a couple of screens. Again, like these are wireframes. This is not a huge deal for me to do as a portfolio piece, but it demonstrated I have the design thinking and the skill set, and it's a good story. And so like this did demonstrate to the team that I have what it takes to do the type of work that I wanted to do on that team. So again, I shared in the sort of like interview for that next role, I shared everything. I had those ribbons out of construction paper. I had the sketches, and I showed kind of the full process. Again, like 6 years later, I look back at these and cringe. So like you will do that to all your work. But at the time, it really, really showed that like, hey, I can have really creative ideas, and I can think about things in a way that would be really impactful and valuable to the team. Again, this was on the side. This was not something that like my day job did. I did this at night and on weekends, and sort of came up with like, what type of work did I need to demonstrate to this next team to show them that I can do it. And I had this like idea where you can like scan it. And again, like there's probably actually an app that already exists. I thought it was a really unique idea at the time. But again, like really, really weave your own story of uniqueness into your work. It's memorable. Like, is it the coolest app ever? Like, probably not, but it has a really great story. And it really demonstrated that I had the design thinking that, again, would bring value to that team. There's other ways that you can add little things to your portfolio if you don't have experience as well. I really wanted to do finite micro interaction work. At the time, does anyone still use Principal? But that's what these were made in. But I really wanted to show the next team that I was applying for. None of the products I had previously worked on had any of this cool stuff. It was, again, data visualization. And so there's a thing called Daily UI, and they did these little prompts to sort of do these. And so I created like 40 of these and just put them in a couple of slides, and I had them up on Dribbble, again, demonstrating that I do have the skills, even if I don't have like the actual experience that you're looking for. I also taught myself Principal, and now it's no longer relevant. So that's cool for me. Another thing that I think you can do is kind of create these opportunities outside of your gig. So again, I actually interviewed at Google twice. I did not get the job the first time. And the feedback I got was that I didn't show strong enough interaction design skills. They're very crisp on, are you an interaction designer or are you a visual designer? I tried to come in as like the unicorn that can do both. And they were like, what are you? So when I went back the next time, I was really, really specific in making sure I showed some of my interaction design process. So I started this hashtag on Twitter called Wireframe of the Day. And I posted like a sketch almost every day for a very long time, just to show, again, I have what it takes to be on this team, even if my day job is not giving me what I need to be on this team. So again, this is a very natural part of the process. Something that I talk a lot about in the portfolio and the capstone class is always be documenting. I did not know a year into it. I'm like, wow, I'm glad I took pictures of all of these sketches because I don't know where some of these sketchbooks are. So I highly recommend to be documenting a lot of your process. It's part of your story, and you never know when you're going to want to put it in a presentation or on a portfolio site as well. So again, your case studies on a portfolio website to apply for a job, they don't have to be like big and elaborate, but they should be really thoughtful and they should be really precise. Again, those are the types of things. It doesn't matter if, I always love to tell the story again of one of our SVC grads that I ended up hiring. She was a previous English teacher. Like her portfolio was not all of this big fancy application design and mobile work. Like she really talked about the design thinking she had to do as a teacher. And so again, it doesn't have to be a big, bold case study, but thoughtful and precise. That is a signal of what type of energy you'll bring to the work you would do on my team. One more example, and then I promise I will move on. At Google, I'm really passionate about accessibility and inclusivity. And so I I highly recommend, if you are passionate about something, finding someone at your company or on your team who's also passionate. So I've got my friend Sarah here. She and I paired up to create this accessibility or inclusivity kit. We felt like designers were designing for experiences that didn't hit all of the devices that our users were on. Not every user of what we were building was on like the latest iPhone. And so we got a bunch of old iPhones and old Android devices. And we had designers on the team test out our app on the old devices. It's like, oh my gosh, this is what a small screen looks like, or this is what happens if you have a terrible internet connection. We also had these vision simulator glasses, which helped simulate vision impairment. So we had a better idea of how to lay things out on screen. This was not a task assigned to me. This is something I was passionate about and sort of went out of my way to do. And so I just want to remind you that there's opportunity everywhere to follow those passions, to find those unique things. Like, this is absolutely a case study I would present on a job interview. It's not a prototype, it's not a software, but it's a process or an improvement to a system that I did make. So again, there is opportunity everywhere. You have to find it. Highly recommend partnering up with someone who might be passionate about it as well. So let's talk about sort of the job description. And again, you probably are reading job descriptions. As Larry mentioned, there's like 40,000 posts. I just want to the little secret is don't take it too literally. I write a lot of job descriptions and I hire a lot, and I just look at a lot too. And so I just found kind of a random one, and I want to pick it apart for a minute. I just want to preface this and let you know that everybody has imposter syndrome, and everybody, regardless of where you're at in your career, doubts that you fit every single item in this job description. When people write these, they're writing the dream. Okay. I don't think I've ever hired anyone that fits every single bullet point and checks every single box 110%. So don't let that intimidate you. I will let you know that the years of experience is a guideline. And I think entry level, I know it's really hard because generally things start with 2 years experience or 3 to 5 years experience. Certainly if it's a very senior role and it's asking for 10 years of experience or 5 years of experience in management, perhaps not at entry level. But I mean, if you see something that's 2 to 3 years, you should not shy away from going for it. I've hired folks. Sometimes I think I want a designer who's got 3 years of experience, but then a killer candidate comes through and she's got 6 months at a random startup, but she's so good, or her portfolio is great, or she's got really great design thinking. So I don't want that to distract you or dissuade you, because oftentimes it's a guideline. Also, the hard skills. I think it's tough because every kind of shop or team uses different software. Again, Figma, Creative Cloud, InVision. I'm going to imagine this product designer at DocuSign doesn't need to use all 3 of those. Hard skills can be taught. You can stay up for a week and watch YouTube videos on how to use anything. So hard skills is actually not really what we're looking for. Really what we're looking for is sort of can you pull off what we need someone to do? And a lot of that is often in the beginning when we talk about the role or the responsibilities. When you're putting together a presentation or a portfolio, make sure you hit on those things. That's what's important. And again, these things too, the preferred qualifications, those are the soft skills. Are you curious? Are you creative? Again, my ShopMate app example, showed that I was curious and creative. Did I check the box that I had experience in fields 1, 2, and 3? No, but I had a good story on the other end. So highly recommend not letting that dissuade you. Again, how do I share relevant work experience, even if it's not design work? In addition to self-driven projects, highly recommend kind of thinking about where you're doing design thinking today. So that can come in the form of improving processes. I know I forget her name, but there was a gal in one of my SVC cohorts where we sort of crafted a case study about how at the restaurant or the coffee shop she worked at, she completely kind of revamped the back of the house, the process. That's design thinking. There was a problem and you solved it in a way that was really unique and specific to the users, or in that case, the employees. Where did you iterate to make things better? Where were you making things more efficient? Oftentimes too, Are you in customer service? Are you solving problems for people? You can spin all of that to be very much a design thinking or a user-centered problem. I am going to keep going. I think I should have enough time. I want to talk a little bit about the job hunt and sort of thinking about it as a design challenge. There's a couple of things you need. You'll learn this too as part of SBC, but just so you know, you need a website. I highly recommend like Squarespace or an equivalent. Don't spend your time building one from scratch. You get all kinds of options with like things like Squarespace. I know folks use Wix as well. Way better, save your time on your actual case studies. And again, your case studies is like, I would recommend 2 to 5 sort of stories that highlight, if they're all kind of, I showed the dribble example, like if they're all lightweight like that, make sure you do have one that's a little deep, but you have a lot of story. You have a story with like a problem statement. Definitely use high quality visuals, of course. And please, like, don't show these process diagrams. This is the process that you would go through, but we want to see it. I want you to show me and not tell me, like, show me how you went through those steps versus like a process diagram. You're going to need a resume, of course. Again, I would not take the resume for granted. Oftentimes as a hiring manager, I open your resume first because that's what I get from a recruiter. And this is really a sneak peek of like your information architecture skills. How are you, again, if you want to be a visual designer, a UI designer, like it's got to be beautiful. Like do not create it in Microsoft Word. Like I'm looking for, again, pixel perfection, hierarchy, like beautiful typography, simple, clear, only one page, and make it a PDF. Again, hot tip, I actually just added this based on my experience over the past couple of years. Load your resume with meaningful keywords. And that is because to get your resume onto the desk of a hiring manager, it needs to sort of go through a couple kind of automated things on the recruiter side. So words like prototyping and presenting and design systems, like those would get flagged if that's what I'm looking to hire for. When we talk about attention to detail, this to me would tell me that your attention to detail would need help. Please don't do this. Please don't do this. Please don't do this. It's going to sit on my desk. I want to know what it is. Like, again, things like this is just, it's sloppy. Like you should be precise in your craftsmanship down to the file name. Again, something like this gets lost on my desktop, put your last name, call it a resume, give it a date, and save it as a PDF. You definitely want to call on your network, particularly when you're trying to get a job. Use them wisely. Please use like genuine email communication. Don't just blast people like on LinkedIn. The folks with you on the call tonight, or if you are a student at SVC, like that's the beginning of your network. I mentioned I have hired 2 graduates of the SVC program because that was where the network started for them. And they impressed me and I was hiring and that was the first place I reached out to. And so really your peers that you kind of meet, at least here, and also kind of meetups and things like that, absolutely kind of the beginning of your network. Please don't do things like this. This is a real note that I got on LinkedIn. So like, I'm not going to respond. So like, again, use very personal communication. We're all humans designing for humans. If you are going to send someone an email, like don't do spelling mistakes, make it grammatically correct. Again, this is your craftsmanship. This is, if I'm going to like refer you for a job, I need to know that you are like A+, and this is not. Okay. I'm going to talk about your brand. Not a ton, but I do think it's important. Just so you know, I see a lot of folks kind of get psyched out by their brand and needing it to be perfect. I'm going to tell you, this is going to change over time. Your progress, not perfection. Like get your website going, get a resume up there. You can change and you'll iterate over time. The case studies you start out with won't be the case studies you have 6 months or 6 years from now. I'm going to give you a terrible example of all of my brands. This is the very first one. I wonder if it has a date on it. This is for my first graphic design job. I printed this out and I had a CD of my portfolio because I did not have a website. But again, like if I had waited until my brand was perfect, I would not have gotten that job. I ended up moving to I think it's a PowerPoint deck. Again, trying to be cool. This is probably early 2000s. I eventually did go over to like a Google slide deck, again, simple, clean. And then today, I don't necessarily have a deck, but your brand should be consistent across the board. So again, we do Google you often as a hiring manager. So like, is your LinkedIn picture and your Twitter picture like professional? Does it look like it came from the same place as your website? It doesn't have to be one for one, but just like a professional kind of thread through all of them. These are out of date. It's not my picture anymore, but it is the same picture across all of those. Okay, I do want to leave time for questions. So I'm going to fly through 10 lessons I learned as a designer. And please get ready for any questions in the chat if you I haven't been watching. So I hope there are questions. Really, I have learned that you can have an awesome career and a life and a family. And I know that is unique to a lot of companies and not the case everywhere, but it really is possible. I've made some major life decisions and very grateful for the flexibility of design and the career that it has brought me, and it's out there for you. Truly the best companies like allow you to be yourself and to bring your best self to work. If you're ever working for a company that's not the case, that's probably not the company for you. I think especially as creative people, as designers, it's really, really important that you, again, feel in a safe place. Psychological safety and trust is like the mantra that I build on my team. So really you want to work for a company that lets you bring your best self. Setting boundaries, very important. Even more relevant these days. I know it's really hard if you're working from home like me to set those boundaries. But again, good companies, good teams, good roles will allow you to have that it's crucial to have that time off. And burnout is real. I don't know if anyone's felt it, but definitely be okay setting boundaries and knowing when to compromise. As designers, like, I'm going to be real, you're never going to get like the dream thing. It's going to take 4 steps to get there. And so really being okay with that compromise, it's a trade-off. So pick your battles and decide which one is kind of maintains the integrity of what you've designed and the experience without losing that. Have a point of view. Again, when I talk about like hiring folks who maybe haven't had a ton of experience, what I have been most impressed with is they have a point of view. And listen, that point of view can be wrong or you can pivot, but like having someone who's bold in their assertion and has a bias for action and will make decisions is really, really good to have someone who has a why. And again, oh my God, there's a huge spider. Oh my God, sorry. It was a huge spider on the keyboard. Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. Okay. So anyway, I have a point of view. Oh my God, I just flung him on the floor. Sorry. And I know we're recording. I'm so embarrassed. Okay. We didn't touch a lot about feedback, but feedback truly is everything. Like if I mentioned like collaboration, giving feedback, not just on the work itself. So I give a lot of obviously like design feedback, but really like giving professional and personal feedback. I always ask folks like, any feedback for me on that presentation? Am I missing anything in my talk track? That type of thing. Again, like will really open your eyes to sort of new things. Find your people. This is another shout out to your network. This group is probably the start of it. I've met so many amazing people at SVC through meetups. There are Slack channels. Again, like your network starts here or where you build it. Those are your people when you need a job, when you want to change jobs, when you need advice about a job or life in general. Like the networks are your people for sure. Stay organized, please, please, please. I have a really great example on the next slide, but I think as designers, like you're moving quickly, you need to have the appearance, you've got it together. I always use this example of like, would you trust a designer whose desktop looks like this? Because this freaks me out. And that to me tells me like, again, it's like your craftsmanship and your just overall, like, how can you organize your solution if it doesn't have to look like this, but again, staying organized in your file management, especially again, thinking back to sort of that design systems crew. Make time to make stuff. I mentioned at the very top, I am a maker at heart. This picture is actually from a letterpress class at SVC, probably like 3 years ago, or maybe even 4. Highly, highly recommend staying connected to your creativity. Again, like sometimes the day job is like a lot, right? Again, burnout is real. We're in front of a screen. There's meeting fatigue. Make sure you're making time to make stuff. That can be music, that can be knitting. It doesn't have to be art. It can be just kind of your own creative outlet. And again, be curious. Always ask the hard questions. Things like, why are we doing this? What are we solving for? Like, those seem very basic, but often when I do ask those questions, I realize everyone in the room has a different understanding. And it's your job as the designer to identify, like, where are we not aligned? And, you know, where can we sort of get on the same page about why are we doing this? What is the problem to solve? And again, I say always be dreaming. Again, like check in with yourself on a regular basis. I use this sort of framework on my team called Heart, Tree, Star. And I ask everyone to identify, it's also a good personal exercise as well. I ask everyone to identify, what do you love to do? Where do you want to grow? And how do you love to be rewarded? This will change throughout your career, but it makes for a really good conversation with you and your manager or a potential manager. If you're interviewing, like, what do you love to do? Where do you want to grow? Really, really important. And again, it helps you set your sights on sort of where you want to go. Follow your gut. I have always followed my gut when it comes to kind of career decisions, taking a leap of faith, and it has proven to be worth it. Oftentimes the reward is a lot higher than the risk, even though it can be hella scary. And truly, I am biased, but a career in design is the best decision you will ever make. You'll get to build rad stuff. You'll meet awesome people. And really, it's everybody's favorite meetings of the day when they get to kind of look at all the design stuff. So it really is the best. I'm here to answer any questions. Please, please, please ask me anything.
And how we'll do this is just open your mic and ask away. And if we step on each other, we'll solve it somehow.
If anyone has any examples of like things you do now that you think are design thinking, my favorite thing to do is how to word them into like design thinking problems. So feel free to, you can always hit me up on LinkedIn, or if you want to share now.
Yeah, I have a question, Cheryl.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm working at a job currently where I'm a sort of a UX designer, sort of a product manager, and the stuff that we're putting out there into the world is not the most glamorous or beautiful kind of, you know, design work. So I'm just wondering, like, what's the best way to frame projects that you're not like particularly proud of, or you don't find like super inspiring from your day-to-day work?
Brennan, I have been there 1000%. So just know that, yes, it happens. At Google, it took me like 7 months to ship like a form. And I was like heartbroken at the end. It was like, oh my God, I worked so hard. And it's just a form on a website. I did a lot of work for that form. So like, I would really focus on what you did do, of like, did you build alignment with stakeholders? Did you like work with, if you were kind of also acting as the product manager, that's an even better layer on top of that. Did you define requirements? Did you, scope things or work under a really tight timeline? Collaboration with stakeholders? Go look at a job description where it says kind of those types of responsibilities. I would highlight that, and not like, oh, look at this beautiful thing, because it might not be, not everything is beautiful. I've designed a lot of enterprise software. It's not all beautiful, but we focus on like, what did you do that was really special about that product that you could then design or apply to a really beautiful project somewhere else. So I would highlight more of the collaboration between stakeholders. Again, alignment is always a big one. I'm sure it took a lot of work to like ship that thing. And even though it's not really pretty, I would focus on like what you did do, presented it to leadership, got feedback from users, success metrics. We got data and it performed this well or that. Having just a clear problem statement and kind of maybe focusing on more of the soft skills that went along with it.
All right, great, thank you.
Yeah, I'll show you some of my stuff. It was not pretty.
You know, Brennan, this might give you some reassurance, and Cheryl, back me up or slap me down here, but I've sure noticed when students from our program are getting hired, there seems to be a little tilt in favor of students whose portfolios include projects that are more back end, more kind of, the heavy lifting, but not the pretty, B2C glamour. I did this website for a, snowboard company. One I remember in particular was a retailer portal for a cosmetics manufacturer, but the consumer never touched it. It was for their retailer network. So I think there's that you might actually be surprised. You might have an advantage in this, what seems to you like mundane assignment that you've been working on.
I will say I often kind of see through those like fluffy projects right away if there are no constraints, and it is, maybe it's beautiful, right? Again, if you're like a UI designer, I am going to look at the aesthetics, but from a UX perspective, if there are no constraints and it's just, oh, I created a bunch of really beautiful screens, like I can sort of see through that right away. Not to say there isn't value in those, it's all about how you present them. But again, I've worked in enterprise, so like I'm looking for someone who can kind of get with some of the gnarly design challenges, and they're not all beautiful and fluffy. They are more of those back end, or it is more of like information architecture on this form that I did for seriously like 6 to 9 months. And so again, I would focus on like those types of things. Like there still can make a really, really solid case study. I would say too, on a website, like on a portfolio as part of a case study, perhaps if you did want to show off, I have more visual design chops than this UI that shipped, you could do, again, like visualize some quotes from users or metrics, or, I've seen some really great, like, 80% of people found it was successful in using this, and kind of using your design chops to supplement maybe your case study with some really pretty visuals that you make. If you wanted to do that, totally optional, but that's another way to kind of just show off those skills.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Zara.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question about user research. Since my background is I studied chemical engineering, so I'm worried if I can be a good user researcher. I mean, I don't know that much about psychology, but I don't know. I just enrolled in the program. Is that enough, or I have to take extra courses? I mean, online courses on Coursera, or?
I would say, Zara, you can be a really good researcher. Funny you mention this. Another team that I work with just hired, she was like a biomedical engineer, and we just hired her as a researcher. And it was because it was working on a healthcare project. And like, so like, I would say, again, being did you say it was chemical engineering?
Yes.
Right? That's a really unique skill set. And so I would highlight like what in there could be applicable as a researcher. Like, did you talk to people? Did you write reports or case studies or papers? Did you analyze metrics or insights? Again, presenting to stakeholders, those types of things. You can tie some of that experience specifically to some work you could do on a team as a researcher. And I would absolutely maybe do a self-initiated project. It can be really lightweight, where you take some of that, your experience, and maybe create a case study, or, identify a problem that you would want to solve, and kind of do a mock kind of research plan through that. And you're kind of bringing your two worlds together.
I see.
You can do it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Paul, go ahead.
Hi, Cheryl, great presentation. Thank you for that. Question with regards to content design and the writing focus. Do you see a place for freelance in the industry?
I do. Again, I think it all depends on, and I would say same thing with a question like Brennan's and others. Like it all depends on where you want to work. Again, some places will look for freelancers, and you can totally make a career out of that. I have worked with career freelancers in the past. I think you decide, like, do I want to go broad and be a freelancer across many places, or do I want to go really deep as a specialist on a team on one product? But yeah, absolutely. Like, I think content design, the world is changing. I have a content design team at Cisco. They recently actually just changed the whole, their naming structure around their job title, because they're not just UX writers, right? They are really designers. And I would say, like, being able to be a freelancer, you could kind of get your hands in a couple different things to see, hey, maybe I like tech, or maybe I like nonprofit, or, you know, you would get to build a really solid portfolio of work.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just remind those of you who are shy and want to stay off camera, that's okay. Put your question in the chat and we'll get to you. But someone just popped up with a question, I bet.
Hey, yeah, hi, I'm Sammy. I asked this question last night at the content design, but I'm very curious to ask you as well with your history in enterprise. So I work in internal IT, like corporate apps. And so there are substantial opportunities for UX, for how all of our tools interact. Some of them we can customize more than others, where we actually could have a designer on it and improve the employee experience. Our company doesn't necessarily understand the benefit of a design team within an internal shared services team. How would you go about selling that to your leadership?
Yes, this is very common. I would also recommend fellow instructor Kristen Kite. If you ever see a talk by her, she's also a master at this, has done this at a lot of companies as well. I think we still see places where design doesn't necessarily have an equal seat at the table, where you still have to sort of, you know, show up and prove the value of. So you could do a couple things. Like, one, again, I would consider, is there someone you can have an ally with? Is there a product manager somewhere or an engineer somewhere? And you can really, as a sort of grassroots designer, like, identify a problem in one of those internal systems and make a lightweight or easy change that would impact others. And then sort of kind of have either success metrics or kind of build a little case study around that. And then when everyone goes to log into that internal tool, oh my gosh, like, this thing is totally improved. Someone finally fixed that. And that's an example of sort of the power of design. And then little by little, you can start to kind of go bigger and bigger until you would really start to, I think, pitch design as a discipline, or as something that needs funding or at least resources. I've also seen really great success with as well, where, like, hey, I'm actually either a product manager or in internal IT, and then like in a hackathon, or again, this like self-initiated thing where we kind of buddy up. Hey, we're both passionate about this thing, or we have this little V team that's really passionate about improving this thing. Again, I think showing by example the value of design. I've given presentations and I've sat in presentations where designers try to, like, hey, VPs, like, here's a couple slides about why design is awesome. And like, I think they listen to be polite, but I think seeing the actual result of what it could mean to the business or to the employee experience, you could tie it back to retention or efficiency or metrics that really matter to the business. I think that's where you would really start to make an impression on maybe stakeholders that could give you, like, kind of resourcing or funding for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Internal IT tools, there's a ton of opportunity there.
Kate, do you want to ask your question, or want me to just paraphrase it for you?
Yes, I could ask. Sorry,
Okay.
My internet connection is super slow.
No problem.
I was trying to save everyone. Yeah, so most of my job experience is in producing, like, web series and television. So I really like the creative aspect of it, but I don't have the graphic design background. So I was just wondering how you felt like those skills could best translate into UX design.
What a rad job. That sounds cool. There's a couple of things that come to mind, top of mind. In the past, I've worked with someone in a role called a UX producer, which is kind of like a UX PM. So I would look into that as well. It feels like as a producer, you're probably like herding cats and you are, responsible for the quality and the consistency and the output of what you're delivering. All of that very applicable to anything, right? Whether it be a TV series or a product like an app. And so I would again highlight those types of things, but I would also consider a sort of foot in the door, like look into roles. I know Microsoft and Google, from my experience, have roles like UX producer, where it's a really good chance you'll work with the design team to do all of the things that you're doing today on the web series or on the TV series. And then that kind of busts you in the industry a little bit. Then you can start to kind of think about and make connections with and kind of start to maybe, dip your foot in the like actual design pool. I worked with someone who was a UX producer. She did all of those things for us. And then she transitioned into a designer because she was so close to us, working with the research team, sketching out or mocking up iterations and like recommendations. And so it feels like your skill set that you have today is super, super applicable to what I would want in sort of either a UX producer or a UX program manager is another one, for sure.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Could you, and I know this is going to be probably a generalization, but could you describe exactly what happens in the hiring process? So how does it come about that you get, you make the request to bring on an FTE and then somebody says, okay, number one, do you already have some people in mind at that point? Or are we just starting a search from scratch? That's part one.
Mm-hmm.
Part two is during that search, like in minute detail, like what happens? HR sends you a list of portfolio URLs to look at. You look at each one for 60 seconds, 60 minutes.
Okay.
Good
question.
You wouldn't mind be as granular as you can without
Totally.
taking the rest of the time up.
As a hiring manager, I'll give you an example. I'm going through this right now. We have a couple big projects coming up. I'm not staffed appropriately. So I map out who's working on what and what holes I need to fill and what skill sets I need for those holes and what like level. So like, okay, I might need a more senior designer over here. I need a head count for that. I might need a more junior designer. So I submit all of my requests. There's definitely a process well above my pay grade. Some or hopefully all of them get approved. I tend to have a boilerplate job description that I might tweak based on the specific project, but generally they're pretty much the same, which is why I say don't take them literally, because again, I can be fluffy on one versus the other, years of experience, things like that. But generally the responsibilities and the expectations are the same. So I have some headcounts. Yes, I work with an internal recruiter. She asks me for, hey, we have a conversation, what keywords or what types of things are you looking for? Preferred location, preferred experience. Now it really does depend on the team and the scenario and like what you're working with. But sometimes, which is why I say don't take the years of experience specifically too literally, because sometimes there is an appetite on the team to like, well, we're looking for a mid-level, but there's this great junior designer and we do have an appetite to like nurture and grow her or him, and let's hire that person. So again, that can be fuzzy. There are some scenarios where I'm not as fuzzy and it's like, I need a senior designer right now who can hit the job, hit the ground running. And so maybe it's a little less flexible in some of those situations, but yes, I work with a recruiter. I give her a list of like, okay, these are like this is why I say load your resume up with keywords. I'm looking for someone who prototypes. I'm looking for someone maybe with enterprise experience, maybe not. So I give her kind of generalizations, and she does basically of the say 100 resumes, it's more like 800 if I'm being real. Of the like 800 resumes, she sends me like 50 at a time. I also scour my network as well. I would much prefer to do a personal connection, friend of a friend, internal referral, someone from SVC, all of that. Like I much prefer to go there myself than kind of wait for someone to give me a dump of resumes. But they go in sort of an internal resume tracking tool. And so, like I said, when I look at your resume first, that's the first thing, at least actually in all 3 companies I've worked for, your resume is the first thing. I see your name, I see your resume, I open it as a PDF. If the resume is ugly or the typography is terrible, definitely, I mean, it obviously goes without saying, but like no grammatical things. Like if the resume is like, oh, okay, I'm looking at it for like 4 seconds. If it's beautiful, if I can see your name, I want your website linked on it. So I just have to click it. I open your website. I'm scanning the first like 3 case studies. I'm scanning the whole website and then I'm going to open the first case study and like, okay, this looks good. I might open the second one. Okay, this looks pretty good. Then I'm like, we got to call this person. If I open your website and like, well, if it's not linked in the PDF, that's more work. So it's like another barrier to entry. Not to say I wouldn't, but just best practice. Again, your attention to detail, your craftsmanship, right in the PDF. I can just click it. I open up your website. Again, if it's like a dead link, which has happened. If your website has a password and the password's not on the resume, like I don't have time to like go back and ask like, where is it? So that's out. Again, if I have to hunt around for the work, I don't see that much, but I am just kind of scanning. Is it a beautiful website? Is it aesthetically pleasing? And that's a lot of times too why I recommend things like Squarespace or Wix. Like you will not go wrong. You just upload your images. Crisp, beautiful, high quality imagery, but you don't have to worry about like aligning it and spacing it. Like don't waste your time with that. Because really it's just a tool to get you kind of the next step, which is generally, I would then say, okay, recruiter, I want to set up some time to talk with this person. We have a 30-minute, like I just call it like a meet and greet, super casual. I generally don't expect anyone to prepare anything. I would tell the recruiter if that was not the case. Just like a meet and greet. Are we vibing? Do you seem like someone I want to work with? What are your goals? Can I tell you about the role? You can ask me questions. Please ask me questions. If you don't ask questions, that's another red flag. Like you don't have any questions about this really awesome role that you want, that I want you to want. So definitely bring questions to the table. And then from there, if all is a go, we move on to the hiring process, which is generally I'll set up some one-on-one interviews with folks on the team. I'm not the only decision maker on my team, super open and transparent about the process. We just hired a new manager for a team I was managing. And so I really put it in the hands of the team to make sure this was someone that they felt they could do their very best work with. And so you'll do a portfolio presentation. So after you do a couple one-on-ones, you'll do a portfolio presentation. Typically that's 45 to 60 minutes. We talk a lot about this in the portfolio class. I have a whole separate deck about that. If you ever want to learn about that, you're going to present your case studies. Do not pull up your website. I've already seen your website. I want you to tell me the story about it. And it should be, maybe they're case studies that were on your website. That's totally fine. But like that's a no-go for me if someone like presents their website. I've already seen that. Think about like you're designing the experience of me in the interview. And so design for the audience, it should be a deck probably. I've also seen some really great Figma presentations as well. So not to be prescriptive, but again, you're designing for that audience. And again, from there, like after that, we all submit feedback. Generally, you won't get feedback on the interview. That tends to be best practice. Whether you get the job or not, typically you won't get feedback, at least in my experience. And even as a team, we often don't talk about it together because there could be bias. We all submit our feedback in like an internal tool. I don't even see the feedback. And so if all is good from there, we say, yes, this person would be amazing for the team. I often follow up with a 30-minute call of like, once we do like a verbal offer or like say, yes, like any questions for me, what else can I answer? So again, like ask me tons of questions. As a hiring manager, I don't decide your salary. That's between you and the recruiter. Definitely negotiate, get paid what you're worth. Do a little research on what's out there and what you're worth. And then from there, you like hit the ground running on the team. I will say, like, I have the luxury right now, and at other places that I've worked in the past, of like, and again, it depends on where you work, right? But like, I do a very low and slow onboarding. Like, I play the long game with hires. We want you to join the company and be with us for a really long time. So you're not going to like start doing features like your first day. Like, you're going to meet people. You're going to do the same thing you did to get the job. You're going to build connections. You're going to go meet your partners. You're going to go have virtual coffee with who you're going to end up like collaborating with. All of that is really, really important to set you up for like the long game. I have a couple new hires now who are like, want that first project. I'm like, no, go meet these 4 people this week. And like, you know, that way, when you do need something from them or they need something from you, like, you're starting to build that connection. It's a little bit easier in person. We've had to do a lot of remote onboarding these days, because I could say like, oh, go get coffee with this person. But we do virtual coffee now. And then from there, like, you're on the team, and we start to soon have conversations about your career goals and your trajectory and where you want to be 1 year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, all of that good stuff.
That was awesome. I'm glad we're recording this.
It's a lot. I could do a whole talk on that. Like,
no,
it's a
of
lot.
course.
And we take it really seriously. Like, hiring is a big deal. I take it really seriously. And so I've been on both sides, right? I've been applying and also hiring, actually for a year, doing the same at the same time. And so it's a pretty unique perspective of like what I've seen work really, really well for people. But I know it's really hard to like get in there in the beginning.
Now, there's some other folks that want to ask questions, but I would just like to, these are like yes or no questions that are just a follow-up. So do I have this straight? When you're looking at somebody's portfolio website, kind of for that first pass, how many seconds?
I mean, under 10.
Under 10 seconds.
I mean, before I'm diving in, like, I'm giving you the 5 second, like, is this visually pleasing? Is it worth a click to like dive into a case study? So like, I'm scanning, and then yes, I will dive into a case study. Then I'm on there for a couple minutes and I'm reading and I'm going deeper.
Okay. So we go from 10 seconds to maybe a couple minutes.
Yeah, a couple minutes.
Okay. Next question. It wouldn't hurt for you to know the applicant prior to even the job being posted.
Correct. Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I much prefer referrals, people from my network. Again, if I know you and we've worked in the past, I've gone after people who are very happy in their current jobs to be like, you're amazing. You have a very unique skill set that we need on this team. Hey, I had you in class at SVC. Are you looking for a UX role? Because I have this entry level position, and right now I have the appetite to like nurture a new designer. So like, what are you doing?
Perfect. So. Thank you. Melissa, I'm sorry. My question took a long time. Are you still with us? Oh, see, now I feel horrible. I better
see another one that says, what are great questions? What are great questions to ask an interviewee? Yes. Yep. I would say there are generic ones, but there are ones that you can be more specific with still being generic. So one of the questions I have asked that I thought was really great was like, what unique skill set are you looking to fill in this role? What is the team's biggest strength and opportunity for growth? I would absolutely ask about like, what is the relationship like with your PM and engineering counterparts? What is the collaboration? All of the things about the job that you're going to want to know. What's the collaboration look like? What's your process? Those types of questions to help you, like, do remember that you are also making sure this is somewhere that you want to work. You know, how do you, what's the visibility like? Am I able to present to stakeholders? You know, you can absolutely ask the types of questions. I would also tie it back to that job description of like, oh, it said one of the responsibilities was like creating prototypes. Do we ever demo those to customers? Like, you can be specific and also very, very broad.
Thank you. Jonathan, you've been very patient.
Hi, thank you. I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Puget Sound in the art department, and I teach students art and design, very heavily analog and real world pottery and carving plaster, stuff like that. so your maker at heart thing really
Yeah.
resonated. And I guess to pinpoint the question a little bit, I'm curious about what, if you could describe a little bit the specifics of the digital tools that are required to succeed in the field, and how something like the 15-month certificate program would prepare a confident creative, but not necessarily a background in design or UX.
Totally. Yeah. So I would say, as Larry mentioned, Figma tends to be the industry standard right now. So I would say if you're going to learn a new design tool, Figma is it. Luckily, it's very user-friendly. I would say more so than like a pro tool like Adobe. So I would say like you were able to dial into this call, you're a confident creative, you'd have great luck in Figma. And I do know, Larry, there is a Figma class. I think you've got fundamentals of Figma.
Yep.
So like, I would say a class or two, and then just working in it and like watching a couple of YouTube videos supplemented with being able, I think one of the best things that was received really well in a class that I taught, I forget which one, but I used to do like, hey, let me do a quick demo of, I think it was even Sketch at the time, but I used to show, and I think being able to ask an instructor and like see that in person is very helpful. So I would start there. And then I would supplement that by like just giving it a try and jumping in there. So I would say Figma, if you're going to learn a new design tool, would be number one. I think, again, don't shy away from a job because it's like Figma is required. Like design tools change all the time. I didn't know Figma 2 years ago. Like, we're learning these and evolving them over time. I like started with Adobe, which that is no longer. I learned Principle. I taught myself. That was a cool thing. And now it's not. So those change over time. So don't let that fool you in the job description. I would take a course or two at SVC and then just get in there and start playing with it for sure. Other digital tools, I think, again, depending on your niche or what you want to do. Like, again, if you're into sound or voice, of course, there's specialty things for that. But I would think Figma is kind of, you can do everything in Figma, including your presentations. But again, things like PowerPoint or Google Slides, things like that are also kind of important to, again, present your work. But I've seen great luck and people do everything in Figma.
I'm going to put into the chat one that I think has become kind of more of a piece of software that UX designers need to know about, and that's After Effects.
Yeah. So if you want to do really beautiful, and again, like I should have learned After Effects instead of Principle, but really beautiful motion design, you can create some really awesome stuff for yourself. And that is a very unique skill set. Not every designer knows After Effects. Not every designer can bring motion or micro interaction. So again, if that's something that kind of, I'm interested in that, taking a couple classes and just showing that that's a passion of yours is a really cool kind of supplement to the portfolio.
Outstanding. Wow, you are like Ms. Precision, winding us up
2 minutes to spare.
Exactly at the right time. So if anybody has a 30-second question, that means you have 10 seconds to ask it and 20 seconds to answer. All right, let's instead spend the last 60 seconds thanking Cheryl for giving us way more information than I thought you could pack into this.
I didn't think I was going to make it. Thank you. Please reach out on LinkedIn. When I do have time, I'm happy to look at portfolios and do that. I know I work with Larry and Marriott quite a bit on portfolio reviewing and things like that. Please let's connect on LinkedIn. Again, your network starts here and you start kind of building those questions, relationships. If you have any questions, please let me know. I can't promise I'll get back to you right away, but I will try.
Again, it was really great to see you and have you join us. And again, it's bedtime.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much, everyone that dialed in. Appreciate it. And again, looking forward to connecting on all of the ways we do these days. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks, Cheryl. And thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good night.